My name is General Clayton Abernathy. Perhaps you've heard of me, Duke.
Every origin of General Hawk from the G.I. Joe universe. G.I. Joe toys have lived through every stage of my life, and I'm sure it's the same for almost every 90s kid. But despite the toy's popularity, one character who rarely gets the spotlight is General Hawk. Well, maybe many casual fans don't even know who he is. That's because his character isn't as flashy as Duke or maybe Snake Eyes. But if you're a G.I. Joe fanatic, you must know that this team is incomplete without this man at the front. When Hawk was first launched, he was just a plastic soldier toy made by Hasbro. But he evolved, constantly getting new names and better designations, as if he rose through the ranks just like a common man. Maybe he's not the most popular character among the Joes, but you can't really think about a G.I. Joe mission without General Hawk briefing his team at headquarters. So, in today's video, I'm going to break down every detail of his journey and also mention some crucial moments from the comics and shows to help you get to know him better. Because G.I. Joe continuity changes depending on whether you're following the toy file cards, Marvel Comics, Sunbow cartoon, or live-action films. We're treating Hawk's history continuity by continuity, so let's get into it. Where General Hawk really started, the original toy file card. Long before General Hawk came into the picture, Stanley Weston developed the original military action figure concept, and Hasbro executive Don Levine helped turn it into G.I. Joe, the toy line that launched in 1964. Even the term action figure was used to distance these toys from being labeled as dolls, because, little boys don't play with Barbies. So, to give them a more masculine edge, Hasbro used early concept names like Rocky, Skip, and Ace, but there was still something missing from the team. So in 1982, when the story expanded, they needed a leader to run the mission. And that's where Hawk comes in. His real name is Clayton M. Abernathy, who was born in Denver to a wealthy family that secured his admission to West Point. After he graduated from Advanced Infantry Training and Covert Ops School, he was assigned to the North Atlantic Range Command and EVR Missile Radar Training. Much of this comes from Hawk's original file card and profile material, while Marvel's G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero #1 gave readers his first major comic story appearance as the team's field commander. It's also revealed that the man is highly skilled with the M16 rifle and the M1911A1 automatic pistol. He was once a fierce soldier and is now a terrific leader, even as General Flagg considered him the best they've got. Hawk was first launched as a toy before he appeared in comics and cartoon shows. And those of you who really played with this toy, congratulations. You're not just ancient, but you know a lot of things about this guy. Well, it's a whole story because he was not always the top dog of the team. He started as a missile commander, as written on his box, which also came with a playset of the mobile missile system. The toy file card, which had a lot of good things to say about his leadership qualities, was the first small piece of information we got about Hawk. But it was the time when Hasbro was figuring out ways to reinvent these characters. And the biggest change they made was giving them the realism of being a human being. In 1983, instead of straight arm toys, the swivel arm battle grip was featured to securely hold a rifle or a grenade. Even the creator of the comics, Larry Hama, who himself served in the US Army, handled Hawk's character pretty realistically and gave him a better role in the comics. In 1986, a new Hawk action figure was launched, and the job description on his toy card listed him as a brigadier general. Around the same time, after General Flagg's death, Hawk became the overall commander of the team. In 1991, the name was changed from Hawk to General Hawk, and General Hawk was also released as part of the Talking Battle Commanders line.
General Hawk's got something to say.
Hold up! He's like, Joe!
But in the 2000s, Hasbro faced an issue. They wanted to revive the toy line, but they couldn't renew their trademark claim on some of the character names. They couldn't use the name Hawk anymore, so it got changed into General Tomahawk. Baroness became Chameleon, and Snowjob became Whiteout. Anyway, Tomahawk was renamed General Abernathy in 2004, and in 2008, he was given another name, G.I. Joe Hawk. After multiple name changes, the live-action film Rise of Cobra was released in 2009, and Hasbro made another strategic move to sell action figures based on the actors. The first and coolest actor-based figure of General Hawk came with the Pit Mobile Headquarters, a massive vehicle playset that also opens to reveal a movable underground base for the G.I. Joes. Then there was another standalone Dennis Quaid action figure that became quite popular for a while. However, I think that these General Hawk toy stories are not really sufficient for us to understand him as a character. And that's why we need to revisit the comics from where it all started. How was General Hawk first introduced in comics? The first 10 issues of Marvel's G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, laid out exactly how the team operates. This is the very first time I came across Baroness, and I had a huge crush on her. But anyway, let's get back to Hawk, who leads the mission and makes interesting decisions from the headquarters. So the very first issue, titled Operation Lady Doomsday, was quite an explosive opener, where Cobra was in its most aggressive form. The issue opens with a press conference inside a train introducing Dr. Adele Burkhart, a brilliant nuclear physicist and one of the brains behind the Doomsday Project. Burkhart has been publicly criticizing the nature of the Doomsday Project, also admitting the fact that the development of the retaliatory weapon can be a total catastrophe for every life on this planet. People have split notions about her position in politics. While some respected her inventions, some saw her as a traitor, but Cobra saw her as a target they could exploit to get to G.I. Joe. So they intercept the press conference by attacking Burkhart. Disguised as journalists, they wait for the right time to latch onto her. The mission is led by Baroness, who reveals herself and grabs Burkhart by the hair, forcing a parachute bag onto her head. Dragging her out of the compartment, she jumps out of the window when a Cobra helicopter swoops in and takes them inside. The scene shifts to the US military base, where General Flagg is briefing the case and looking into the threat note left by Cobra. This is an obvious trap, so Flagg immediately thinks of the Special Ops team G.I. Joe, because no one could handle this operation better than them. Here's the crucial moment where all the information about the Joes is laid out in front of Flagg, and the main focus is on Hawk, who's gonna blaze the trail for this mission. He's still the colonel, the field commander, so high command officers aren't fully aware of his skills yet. When Flagg introduces him to his fellow commander, there's a question of whether he's just a lucky guy, but Flagg quickly responds that he's the most ideal choice. The operation's carefully planned and the group divided into teams, each tasked with specific missions. There's one team led by Stalker, where Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Breaker, Flash, Grunt, and Short Fuse would infiltrate the Cobra base and sabotage their mission from within, while the second group, led by Hawk himself, would follow them to the fort and back them up. In the briefing room, through a hologram, we see the entire Caribbean island, where Cobra has hidden Burkhart inside a Spanish fort. G.I. Joe had previously run a Blackbird mission over this place, so Hawk knows everything about this area. He gives thorough directions to the entrance and warns his team about Cobra's high security system. He also introduces Baroness to them, mentioning that she cannot be trusted in any situation, not even if she's dead. There's also the ethical dilemma in the room, as Burkhart is seen by many as a traitor, but Hawk draws a line between their personal feelings and duty. He reminds his soldiers of the oath they had taken early in their lives to set aside their biases and serve their nation. This is the defining moment where I already like him for his patriotism, but it also made me wonder about his own political ideologies. Like, does he even recognize the flaws of his own country's political system? Well, we'll get there soon enough. So, after they arrive on the island, Stalker uses a jet-assisted jump pack and dismantles the Cobra security on the coast. Meanwhile, Breaker and Flash manipulate the radar system, and Scarlet and Snake Eyes sneak inside the fort to rescue the hostage. But it turns out the Cobra is ready for this attack, so they make their own game plan to mess with the Joes. The team stops a sudden transfer of Burkhart from the fort, thinking that they've saved the actual hostage, but it's once again a trick played by Baroness. Meanwhile, inside the fort, Cobra Commander reveals something even more dangerous than what's happening outside. He's buried 5 tons of explosives beneath the fort, and the timer is in his hand. Snake Eyes and Scarlet arrive right on time, but Cobra Commander fires shots at them first. Burkhart, who doesn't want anyone to die on her watch, risks her own life to save Snake Eyes and gets shot in her arm. The shootout gets the commander injured as well, but he flees the spot right away to evade capture. The rest of the team gets in and finds some blood on the floor, indicating that Cobra Commander is still alive and he's somewhere beneath the floor trying to detonate the bomb. So they immediately evacuate the place through a chopper, just moments before the whole place gets destroyed in a blast. Burkhart can't thank them enough for their rescue, and Hawk is relieved by their temporary triumph. Cobra Commander and Baroness are still out there, making plans for revenge. They come back again and again in the later issues, and so does General Hawk, but not all of them contain him as the primary character. So I'm going to be focusing on the ones where he matters. But one thing you must know about him is that when the situation demands it, he can step beyond the command and wear multiple hats. Sometimes he can be really unpredictable and morally ambiguous in some parts of the story. So let's dig deep into these issues to know exactly why he makes such calls. In issue number 5, titled To Fail is to Conquer, To Succeed is to Die, Hawk plays a dangerous intelligence game, making himself look like a traitor long enough to bait Cobra into chasing the wrong target. So first of all, he sends a small team of G.I. Joe soldiers to Afghanistan with a mission to rescue a Russian plane before anyone could take it. Afghan rebels want the weapons in exchange. So the Joe team climbs up the mountain to meet the rebels and makes a deal with them. Now, things get pretty murky from here as we see a mysterious figure calling Cobra to let them know about the Afghanistan mission, and this figure is revealed to be Hawk himself. So why this treason all of a sudden? Well, this is a whole setup to distract Cobra. When Hawk sends his team to Afghanistan, he already knows that their arch-enemy Cobra would chase them down. So he carries out the actual rescue of the plane the day before and misleads Cobra with false information. Now, Cobra and the October Guard attack the G.I. Joes while they're carrying the crashed plane, which is actually a decoy filled with scrap metal inside. This is perhaps the first time in G.I. Joe comics that Hawk is pushed beyond his one-dimensional role, which proves that even he can bend his ideals to get the job done. However, in the next few issues, I'm going to point out some flaws in Hawk's critical thinking, which are subtle mistakes made by him that helped Cobra get dangerously close to winning. In issue number 9, titled The Diplomat, Hawk figures out that American diplomat Brian Hassel is going to be assassinated by Cobra. So he sends his team of Scarlet and Clutch to protect Hassel, but it turns out that Hassel is the actual assassin, and the victim is the Al-Alawi ambassador. Although in the last moment, Hassel is knocked out by Scarlet, this could have been a major problem if they had relied on the false intelligence Hawk received. These are some of the vital moments from the comics that show his trajectory as a leader and a strategist. But one of my favorite comic issues where Hawk himself gets into the field to stop a Cobra-affiliated group is issue number 4, titled Operation Wingfield. How does issue number 4 define his character as a soldier? There's a reason why this is one of my favorite G.I. Joe comics, because instead of the usual Cobra villains, here we get a man who stands in a role quite similar to Hawk, yet is totally different from him. Both of them lead a group of soldiers, but Hawk represents a disciplined military command under lawful authority, while Wingfield represents extremist command built on fear, paranoia, and control. Maybe the stakes don't feel as high in other missions where Cobra is a direct threat, but Operation Wingfield is thoroughly entertaining. So let's take a deep dive into the story. Vance Wingfield leads a radical paramilitary group that's operating shady businesses in Montana. So the FBI becomes suspicious of their growing influence and runs covert surveillance on their team. They record footage of Captain Wingfield getting harsh with his troopers, pushing them to their limits. Right behind him stands his wife, Sherry, and Lieutenant Carruthers, who are quite against his strict training schedule, but Wingfield is stubborn and doesn't really listen to his wife, which later brings him down, as it should. Alright, so back to headquarters, Hawk shows the footage and splits the team into 2 groups. Hawk himself, with Zap and Grunt, will infiltrate the team disguised as troopers, while Snake Eyes will run his own reconnaissance to monitor the base and the armory. So the next day, when they join the troopers, they see something strange. Vance is welcoming the troopers and top cadres, along with their families, into the base camp because it's an easy way to control a man by taking control of his family. Hawk and his teammates join the troopers in the training field and pretend to underperform in every sport, but they find it hard to hide their qualities as highly skilled soldiers of a special ops team. Meanwhile, Snake Eyes runs his independent investigation, surrounding the camp, and stumbles upon something sinister. He finds out about the B-29 Superfortress bomber, which is an outdated model, but it can still carry nuclear warheads to the targeted destination. Snake Eyes continues his investigation and finds out about a secret meeting place. He climbs up the safe house and spots Captain Wingfield discussing some sinister plans with their top cadres. Here, Vance confirms that they're just an extension of Cobra, which is funding their technology as well as transporting nuclear warheads that have the potential to start a 3rd world war. There are already 2 nuclear warheads in their possession, one of which would be flown by the B-29 to Vladivostok, Russia, and the other one is buried inside the base they've been operating. Only he, his wife Sherry, and Lieutenant Carruthers know about the exact location of the bomb. Meanwhile, Hawk and Grunt enter the warehouse, where they find advanced military hardware. But before they can escape, the alarm rings and alerts every trooper in the base. They capture Hawk and Grunt, who reveal their true selves by throwing some punches at them. Wingfield, realizing they've been compromised, asks Sherry to start their plan B, while Lieutenant Carruthers prepares to take off in the bomb. Meanwhile, Hawk and Grunt are about to get executed when Snake Eyes pops up to rescue them. He's already called in some help and manpower from the Joe headquarters. But on the other hand, Carruthers has boarded the bomber, heading toward Vladivostok to drop the warhead. So without wasting time, Hawk pursues him by boarding a jet. He continuously fires at the bomber's fuel tanks to slow it down and give Carruthers a chance to bail out. But Carruthers takes the bomber right into the ocean along with the bomb inside it. Back in the camp, when Wingfield learns that the bomber went off and so did Carruthers, he is about to activate the 2nd warhead to die with honor, which means cleaning up the whole base along with the kids and the wives of the cadres. Sherry asks him to stop this nonsense, but Wingfield really never listens to her. So she does what she should have done a long time ago. She shoots Wingfield dead and gives Zap and Grunt the location of the bomb. The time is running out, but Zap and Grunt finally manage to disarm it, saving the whole camp from what could have been a bloody massacre. Well, General Hawk is pretty active throughout this series, but not in every storyline he's in the field. He's more like backroom support for the Joes who fight the fight. And in some issues, he's a storyteller too, which brings us to our next comic issue, Snake Eyes: The Origin. How does the Marvel run reveal his Vietnam-era backstory? So, Snake Eyes: The Origin is a two-part comic arc that focuses mainly on Snake Eyes, the silent masked soldier of G.I. Joe. It has nothing to do with Hawk's origin precisely, yet I think it's a crucial part of Hawk's journey, especially in how he came to recruit one of his most trusted and lethal operatives. Growing up as a comic fan, I have a thing for the masked vigilantes of the comic world, whether it's the Dark Knight, Rorschach from the Watchmen series, or Snake Eyes from G.I. Joe. But the most interesting pattern I noticed is that behind every lone wolf vigilante, there's always someone who sees them for what they really are and still chooses to trust them anyway. For Snake Eyes, that trust comes from the whole G.I. Joe team, but most importantly, it comes from General Hawk. In issues number 26 and 27, Hawk serves as a storyteller, revealing his connection to Snake Eyes and recounting the most tragic moments of his life as an isolated soldier, when he was not even a Joe. The issue follows Snake Eyes through fragments of his past, but it opens in the present time, in the Everglades, where Cobra villains like Destro, Cobra Commander, and Baroness fight against the field agents Mutt, Torpedo, and Tripwire. Meanwhile, there's a suspicion going around about Snake Eyes, as he shares a similar hexagram tattoo with Storm Shadow. Now, this raises a lot of questions regarding Snake Eyes, and Hawk investigates to know if he's really the one he pretends to be. As Stalker joins Scarlet and Hawk into looking into this matter, he recalls his days during the Vietnam War, where Snake Eyes fought alongside him. He was basically a recon ranger in Southeast Asia and very efficient in handling all kinds of weapons. However, there was another guy named Tommy who was like a brother to them, especially to Snake Eyes. Stalker recalls that during an ambush, it was Tommy who risked his life to save Snake Eyes, and ever since, the two became inseparable souls. After the war was over, everyone returned to their home and to their families. Snake Eyes, who had a twin sister, used to keep her photograph during the war, but the photo was destroyed, which felt like a bad omen for his family. When he returned to his country and waited at the airport to meet with them, nobody showed up. After a while, General Hawk in his formal attire came to take him back. Tragically, Snake Eyes' family died in a car accident, and Hawk had to deliver the news to him. Hawk just put a hand on his shoulder, and the silence felt so loud that Snake Eyes instantly realized he was left all alone in this world. Hawk recalls these incidents following Stalker's wartime story, so Scarlet adds to it. She can remember her early days in the team when most of the male members would underestimate her except for Snake Eyes, who respected her. Even in one of the missions when Scarlet was trapped and was about to die, Snake Eyes risked his own life to save hers, and in that process, his whole body and face were injured. After the war, when Snake Eyes was a lonely, isolated guy trying to find a purpose in his life, he joined the Ashrakage clan. Tommy was born in this clan, so when he found a friend in Snake Eyes, he invited him to join the clan and became sword brothers. During this time, they both carried the Ashrakage hexagram tattoo, the symbol that later made the Joes question Snake Eyes' connection to Storm Shadow. Although the clan disbanded, the friendship stayed for a while until Tommy joined Cobra and took the mantle of Storm Shadow. Snake Eyes lost his purpose again, so he met with Hawk. Now, Hawk was aware of Snake Eyes' past and his efficiency as a fighter, so he asked him to join his special ops team and made him one of his Joes. This wasn't an easy recruit either. Hawk recalled that after he left the Ashrakage clan, Snake Eyes briefly disappeared to live in a remote cabin in the high Sierras. Hawk took his fellow member Stalker with him and started looking into the disability checks to locate him. There, they came across some villagers who told them some pretty weird stories about Snake Eyes turning into a werewolf. When Hawk finally managed to find the cabin where he was, a wolf literally stood in their way. But fortunately, it was really a wolf named Timber, who was the only companion in Snake Eyes' life at that time. Hawk felt the pain and loneliness in his heart and asked him to join the G.I. Joe team to regain his sense of purpose. Snake Eyes became part of the team, but without Hawk, he could have ended up as just a village rumor in the high Sierras. The comic issues where Hawk lost the pit. Now these are 4 of the most important comic issues that need a special shout out. This is the conflict related to Springfield, featured in issue number 50, in which Hawk faced a moral dilemma once again. So there's a place in Cobra territory called Springfield, which becomes a target city in the G.I. Joe operations. They simply want to bust Cobra, removing them from the area. So Hawk stretches out a perfect plan of attack. He divides these teams into 4 groups and targets the airport to stop them from the get-go. But the airport is not the entrance route Cobra's going to use. the airport becomes a trap and Cobra gets away. Although the attack is launched in Springfield, Hawk can't get solid proof that the area is dominated by Cobra. This is a vital time in the comics where Hawk's position in the group is at stake, but he earns it back through his honesty. In the following issues, Zartan, the Master of Disguise, becomes central to the fallout, while the Dreadnoks and their Thunder Machine remain part of the larger Cobra chaos around this arc. Zartan's presence around the pit fallout makes everything worse, and the Joe team's secrets become dangerously vulnerable. So Hawk doesn't do much action in this particular comic. He manages the threat at a higher level, but in issue number 53 titled Pitfall, everything spirals back to a point of downfall. So the special committee connected to the Pentagon power block known as the Jugglers is already investigating G.I. Joe because, after the Springfield operation, there's a concern about whether this special ops team is necessary. The pit is already closed and under construction when Cobra launches an attack on the base. Cobra Commander leads the assault, and figures like Destro become part of the chaos beneath the base. Now, the way Hawk handles this situation shows how tactful he is as a leader. He doesn't wait for orders anymore. He quickly focuses on survival, evacuation, and keeping the team alive while the pit collapses around them. The pit is already on the verge of collapse, so he finally lets go of all the attachments he has with this place when it completely falls apart. It's like home to the G.I. Joe soldiers and they just watch it burn. These 4 issues make such a crucial change in the overall trajectory because they put Hawk in the most realistic and vulnerable position. Although they operate some guerrilla-style missions independently for a while, they finally rebuild their pit, but their previous address is lost forever. How is General Hawk first introduced in animation? General Hawk is a late bloomer in this franchise as a major animated character. The Sunbow Marvel animated run began with the 1983 miniseries, but even though Hawk existed in the toy and comic line, the early Sunbow cartoon pushed Duke as the more visible animated field leader, and Duke has always been a popular G.I. Joe. So the bottom line is that Hasbro's animated storytelling often depended on market sales and product availability. The whole storytelling part revolved around the toys only, so some characters got pushed harder than others. However, Hawk appeared later after finally entering the public view as a bigger animated player. Hawk made his major Sunbow animation debut in the episode titled Arise Serpentor Arise Part 1, and then remained important across the 5-part Serpentor arc. I'm going to revisit these episodes where Hawk fights the newborn supreme leader of the Cobra, Serpentor. The first episode opens at Joe headquarters, where Hawk, Duke, and Flint run an informal inspection and find out the Joes have gone lazy. The gaps between the missions have made them very sloppy and detached from their schedules. He even reprimands Slipstream and Mainframe, asking them to be more cautious, because Cobra could take advantage of the situation. And surprise, surprise, that's exactly what happens. Cobra launches a sudden attack using battle android troopers, which beat the hell out of the Joes for a while. Hawk thinks the lack of proper guidance has made them so slow, so he takes back the helm to train them properly. He also discusses it with Sergeant Slaughter to figure out a solution. Slaughter asks him to join the training alongside his teammates because he is, after all, a soldier. Now the narrative shifts to Cobra, where Dr. Mindbender is thinking about replacing Cobra Commander with someone who is far stronger and more powerful than he is. So he has a vision where he sees a giant DNA structure that is necessary in the creation of this leader. That means Dr. Mindbender can actually build a human leader for themselves. But all he needs are DNA samples from historical leaders across centuries, like Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, and Sun Tzu. Mindbender manages to brainwash some of his fellow decision-makers of the group, like Destro and Baroness. But Cobra Commander, who finds out about their plan, decides to pull the plug at the last moment. Part 2 brings Hawk into a more active state to fight against Cobra, but the team still isn't aware of their plan to make a new leader. Beachhead learns that Cobra has been targeting multiple historical tombs around the world, which doesn't make sense to Hawk, but he doesn't wait for a clear response to take action. He makes the strategy beforehand and divides the team into multiple small strike units, sending them each to locations such as Egypt, Paris, Siberia, and Yucatan. Now, a single coordinated attack wouldn't stop this large-scale Cobra mission, so each team runs its own independent operations across the world. Hawk's most active sequence is in Paris, where he leads a column of heavy tanks to defend Napoleon's tomb. But he keeps it low-key when the mayor of Paris is so afraid of so much destruction and chaos. Hawk also maintains communication with Duke from Siberia, Flint from the jungle, and Dusty from Egypt. They all report to Hawk, who makes information useful for the mission. In Part 3 and Part 4, the tomb excavation operations become rampant all around these prime locations, and G.I. Joe is present everywhere to stop them. But to no avail, Cobra succeeds in its attempts to get the DNA samples. However, only one sample is missing from the collected items, the DNA of Sun Tzu. Mindbender isn't ready to give up, so he makes a plan to use the substitute DNA of a highly skilled fighter, Sergeant Slaughter. Now, Slaughter could be an enemy, but his biceps could make even a guy fall for it. So, Mindbender captures Slaughter and takes his DNA as the last sample to cook the final recipe. However, the first result is unexpectedly bad because Cobra Commander has released a virus that messes with the recipe, and instead of a fierce leader, the outcome is a fierce monster made of these corrupted DNA samples. The creature attacks everyone until Mindbender fixes the issue and finally gives birth to a supremely powerful leader of their group, Serpentor, who wears a Cobra suit like he's at a kid's birthday party. Finally, this leads us to Part 5 in the season finale, where Serpentor is now the ultimate leader, and he is aggressive, decisive, and driven more tactically than Cobra Commander was. He instantly sidelines Cobra Commander and rules the system, even pushing aside the very people who created it. Turns out, he really is a snake. Jokes aside, in the 5th part, Serpentor occupies the National Mall in Washington, D.C. He wants total surrender from the US president because he believes he's the ruler of the world, and Cobra is just a tiny box that doesn't fit him. So he demands a direct confrontation with the president, who actually accepts the offer and comes to meet him at the Lincoln Memorial. But it isn't really the president, it's General Hawk in disguise. When the confirmation turns into gloating, Hawk reveals himself with a gun hidden in his suitcase. This is also the signal to the other Hidden Joes to come out and launch the attack on Serpentor. The rest of the Cobra villains step back as G.I. Joe's commander, General Hawk, steals the show in the last moment. Which Sunbow episode calls Hawk the founder of G.I. Joe? So, who do you think actually founded the G.I. Joe team? Is it really General Hawk? Well, it can be debatable because across the comics and shows, this statement has changed many times. But the most well-known founder of the group in the Marvel continuity is actually General Lawrence Flagg, who first had the idea of creating an elite unit to fight Cobra operations. And in the comics, Hawk became the first lead field commander of that team. Although he was absent in the early Sunbow cartoon episodes, in Season 2, it was established through a Cobra villain that General Hawk was indeed the man who founded the team. The statement can be wrong depending on the continuity, but in a way, it's true for the Sunbow version. The team's core principles and structure all came from Hawk's leadership, so no matter who built it, people would always remember who shaped them ideologically. G.I. Joe is designed to fight forces like Cobra, but sometimes their fights just feel like a full-on mudslinging contest. That's exactly what they do in the episode titled Not a Ghost of a Chance. Back in the 80s, there was no social media. Otherwise, this could have been a very nasty Twitter fight. However, they do it the old school way. They come live on a broadcasting channel's talk show, 20 Questions, hosted by a media personality called Hector Ramirez, to decline any kind of involvement in the recent disappearance of the AR-90A aircraft, also known as Ghost. Ghost is a secret experimental stealth plane designed to fly so low it appears like a ghost, and the pilots, Frank Sullivan and Ron Michaels, have no idea they've been tracked by Cobra. Cobra has a special technology to detect these kinds of secretive aircraft, so they attack the plane and the pilots go missing. Now, Cobra becomes the immediate suspect, but on live television they deny claims and instead blame G.I. Joe for this disaster. Funnily, the Joes have the proof, but to get it, they need to get their plane back. Meanwhile, Lady J and General Hawk also appear on the same TV show to give a feisty response. General Hawk clearly states that they have evidence against Cobra, but Mindbender denies it, saying that the founder of the G.I. Joe team would obviously say such things to defend his team. Now, it's clearly a nod to prioritize the character more in the show, and General Hawk's quick response shows why this is the truth. So he says the G.I. Joe wasn't even necessary in the first place, but it was Cobra who forced them into existence. That's a befitting reply that makes all of these villains shut their mouths for the rest of the day. However, Ramirez would see the end of it, so he decides to show the real footage captured by Ghost's rear camera, which the team has rescued. This proves on live television that it was Cobra all along who chased the aircraft and shot it down, leading to a crash. The mission in this episode is mainly carried out by Flint and Lady J, while Hawk remains in the back room to direct them with proper information. Does the live-action film reimagine him? The name G.I. Joe is already tied to an image of an ordinary American soldier, including through the 1945 film The Story of G.I. Joe. But the toy line itself came from Stanley Weston's action figure concept and Hasbro's 1960s development. So it took decades for this toy line to finally become a live-action film in 2009. Starring Channing Tatum as Duke and Dennis Quaid as the team's leader, General Hawk, the film was directed by Stephen Sommers, who also directed the first two Mummy films, by the way. Well, this is the first time that General Hawk we see on screen was a flesh and blood man. The movie was a bit disappointing, to be honest, but Dennis was somewhat serviceable as Hawk. The figure introduced in the comics and on the show was far from what Dennis looked like on screen, but that doesn't actually matter. The character was very underdeveloped and appropriate for a popcorn action movie. However, since this is the first time Hawk appeared on live film, I think it's important to see what makes him stand out in the story. The film introduces Destro's cinematic version of Dr. James McCullough, who created the lethal weapons known as nanomites using nanotechnology. NATO bought 4 nanomite weapons or warheads from McCullough's company, Mars, but that was another calculated tactic planned by the Cobra leaders. When Duke and Ripcord are assigned to transport the warheads in a convoy, they're attacked by Baroness, whose real name in this film's version is Anna Lewis. Anna used to be Duke's ex-fiancée, who left him and later joined Cobra as a powerful member. But she's actually under mind control from her brother, Rex, who disguises himself as the Doctor in the movie. Now, Duke and Ripcord are badly attacked before they're rescued by the Joes and brought to the pit, G.I. Joe's underground command center in Egypt. The warheads are already compromised by McCullough, who has placed a tracking device in each. So, the villains also locate the G.I. Joe base where the warheads are kept secure. Hawk thoroughly examines Duke and Ripcord, and after a rigorous training period, allows them into the team. The film's most famous set piece comes in Paris, where nanomites destroy the Eiffel Tower, while the final act escalates into a larger Cobra and Mars endgame. However, back in the base, Hawk is under attack by Zartan, who has come to help steal the warheads. In a fight, when Hawk is almost defeating Zartan, Storm Shadow intervenes and injures Hawk pretty badly with his sword. By the end of the film, Hawk survives. Storm Shadow appears to die after his duel with Snake Eyes, though later franchise material brings him back. McCullough, after getting his whole face burnt, takes on the metallic mask to become Destro. The Doctor, whose real identity is Rex Lewis, becomes the Cobra commander we know from the comics. Baroness is captured and taken into custody, where officials plan to remove the nanomites from her body so that she could be freed from Rex's control. Rex and McCullough are captured by the Joes, but Zartan manages to escape in the most dangerous way possible. After having his appearance altered by nanomites, he infiltrates the White House and assumes the identity of the President of the United States. This was the first and last time General Hawk made his appearance in the movie, and I think it's pretty sad that the live-action films couldn't go beyond typical comic-centered stories. It could have been a great spy-verse if treated right, but regardless of this film, this character will always be remarkable. G.I. Joe comics avoid hyper-realistic political threats, but they never really worship the hero in each version of the story. Here, General Hawk's not always the flawless commander of the team. He makes mistakes and he accepts them, and that's enough for the kids to idealize him. After all, the heroes are the ones who learn from their mistakes. On that note, this video's over. If you liked the explanation, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more lore breakdowns. Also, let us know in the comments how big of a G.I. Joe fan you are. Until then, goodbye, we'll see you in the next one. And, as always, stay marvelous.